Okay, with the signal, I now call this meeting to order. If you would join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Denise, will you call roll?
Certainly. Good evening, everyone. Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Clement. Commissioner Ledoux.
Here.
Commissioner Willett.
Here.
Commissioner Souther.
Here.
Commissioner Smith. Here. Commissioner Maleko.
Here.
Councilmember Rep. Maloney.
Thank you. I now ask for approval of minutes from the June 26th, 2024 regular meeting.
I have a couple corrections. On Clement and Souther, it didn't mark that they were present or absent, and they were absent. Under the also present, we just learned that it's Pierce Flanagan, not Flanagan Pierce. And also, shouldn't it also be noted that Councilmember Maloney was present, since he was up at the dais? And then most importantly, if we could fix the spelling of my last name. Down near the bottom.
I think we can accommodate that. Is there a motion with those edits?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with those edits from June 26th.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Do we actually vote on that?
Mhm.
Okay. Denise, will you call roll?
Commissioner Clark.
Aye.
Commissioner Ledoux.
Aye.
Commissioner Willett.
Aye.
Commissioner Souther.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith. Aye. Commissioner Maleko.
Aye.
Thank you. Then, I guess item number 3, public hearings. I now open the public hearing. The provisions of the City Municipal Code, and in particular Title 17 thereof, the subdivision regulations, and the comprehensive plan of the City of Canyon City are incorporated into the record of the hearing as if set forth verbatim. May we have a staff report from the city planner?
Certainly. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. This evening, we are here to consider an amendment to the city's Unified Development Code. Before we commence a discussion of the ordinance itself, it's necessary to provide some context as to what motivated the drafting of this ordinance. The 2024 Colorado legislative session, which concluded in June, produced 4 bills which advanced to the governor's office for signature. These bills were drafted in such a way that their subject matter overrode local land use regulations in certain conditions. The first 3 of these won't apply to Canyon City. They are regulations specifically addressing development around transit stops, which is a type of development known as a TOD, or transit-oriented development. State legislature appears to be creating legislation that it's intended to push density around transit stops. Add to this that Canyon City already has a pathway for property owners to receive approval for accessory dwelling units, and the first 3 of those really don't apply to us. It's the last one that has caught our attention. HB 24-1007, as written, eliminates occupancy limits for residential dwelling units, again in an apparent effort to push density around transit stops. This would include a limit on the number of, basically preclude any limit on the number of unrelated adults living within a single dwelling unit. This would directly supersede the definition of family as stated in section 1713.070 of the UDC, which specifically states that Our code defines family to include a group of up to 8 adult persons unrelated by blood, marriage, or adoption. Most Colorado municipalities contain a definition of family which would allow for either 4 or 6 unrelated adults, so our definition is already quite generous in comparison to other municipalities around the state. Normally legislation which emerges from the state legislature is focused on issues of statewide concern. That is the constitutional obligation of the legislative branch of the state government. When the state legislature creates bills which override local government regulations, it typically occurs because numerous municipalities or counties have adopted regulations which conflict with one another, or the legislative branch has found that the proposed bill has extra or multi-jurisdictional facets to it, requiring the state to set the parameters for all of the involved local governments that they will have to work within. What concerns staff in this case is that HB 24-1007, no such argument of a multi or extra jurisdictional significance is offered. The state, in our opinion, has failed to make a convincing argument that an issue of statewide urgency exists on the definition of family, and therefore completely eliminating the occupancy limit associated with families. Given that the Canyon City definition of family is already more than generous, more generous than most Colorado municipalities currently offer, it is unclear why the City of Canyon City should amend our Unified Development Code to remove the 8 unrelated adults and have no upper occupancy limit on the number of unrelated people living in a residence, particularly given how recently we adopted the UDC. Again, staff does not find that there is a statewide sense of urgency on this issue, nor has the state of Colorado made an argument for why local governments need to amend their land use codes to eliminate residential occupancy limits. For this reason, staff has asked to have the ordinance that's contained in your agenda packets created. The title of this ordinance states the ordinance's intention. The ordinance does not make any changes to development standards or requirements in the city. Rather, it offers an affirmation, which is meant next to the city's definition of family, which reads, among other things, the city rejects the assertion that the subject matter of HB 24-1007, now codified as Colorado Revised Statute Section 29-20-111, is a matter of mixed statewide and local concern, and determines that Section 29-20-111 is expressly superseded and preempted within the city by the Canyon City Municipal Code, specifically in the definition of family. The language of the ordinance makes the city's case that the state has not done its required job of demonstrating why an issue of statewide importance exists, and therefore why residential occupancy limits must be eliminated from all municipal codes statewide. Further, Canyon City is making this assertion under the auspices of our Home Rule Charter, something the Colorado State Constitution provides for. Under our Home Rule authority, Canyon City is affirming that our Unified Development Code adequately addresses the issue of residential occupancy limits for the residents of the city, and we are not making the requested change. Staff therefore recommends that Planning Commission, following a public hearing on this request, recommend that City Council approve the draft ordinance affirming that the city will not be amending the UDC to remove residential occupancy limits. That would conclude the staff presentation. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Austin Pierce Flanagan, our city attorney, is also on with us if you have any questions of a legal nature as well.
I have a question. I've read and heard about Fort Collins, that they tried to do a U+2 regulation for occupancy limits, and it was a huge backfire from the community. especially because it's a college town, and so that was a really big limitation for the students. I was wondering if there have been any other communities that have tried to have maintain limitations on housing, and if and what you've seen across Colorado.
So Austin, your firm represents a number of Colorado municipalities. Have you seen other pushback?
Yeah, I think there's a handful of jurisdictions right now who are going through the same process as the city is considering tonight. I don't believe any have gotten as far as Canyon City yet in putting it on an agenda, but I know for sure that they're being scheduled. So talking about Fort Collins and Boulder, that's actually, if you look at the legislative history of this bill, they're mentioned quite a lot. So the state was concerned really with sort of that backlash you mentioned, Commissioner, related to limiting occupancy for specified groups. And that's sort of what rose in large part to the state passing this legislation. And as Patrick mentioned, there are a handful of municipalities who are sort of, walking the same line as the city is right now. But I think the city's just a little bit further ahead in that process than the others that I'm aware of.
Okay. I know for Fort Collins, I think the governor intervened in part of that proceedings, and now they went to the other extreme where there's no regulations whatsoever for occupancy. And so I was just going to say that I did feel like the 8 of unrelated people seemed pretty generous.
And I have not, in my capacity as city planner, I have not found instances, at all, where people find that to be excessive and that it should be lowered. So I don't know why we should change it. I don't know that we should either lower it or remove it. I think we're at 8. That's fairly generous. It hasn't been a problem, so why go tinkering with it if it isn't a problem?
It's both generous, and it also makes a statement that we're a home rule city that makes our own rules for what's best for us.
Well, I have a question, or actually kind of a statement too. Originally, when we put this together, it had a lot, or not a lot, but had some things to do with the occupancy rate based off fire safety issues. I didn't see anything in this related to the fire department, so I'm guessing that they're still okay with the 8 number we have currently, and they don't have any additional concerns with that.
They have not expressed concerns to us.
Okay.
Fire occupancy regulations are generally something that's regulated when someone pulls a building permit to construct something. Occupancy limits, as a zoning concept, there is some overlap, but there's not a direct correlation between the two.
Right. Well, it generally applies to commercial buildings, not so much individual homes, but there is a umbrella factor in the fire safety codes about occupancy rates in individual homes too, which, like I said, generally doesn't come into play with this ordinance. But since they were part of our original discussion, I can't imagine they would have a problem with leaving it that way.
They've had, since we adopted this code in 2021, they've had 3 years now to express concerns with an occupancy limit of 8. And I've had no conversations like that with the fire district.
Thank you.
I have a question. Isn't section 1713 the definition section?
Yes.
Is that where you intended for this ordinance to go?
What this does is add the statement that I read into the record. Housing limits, city is aware of the passage of Colorado House Bill 24-1007, et cetera. That will go, ideally what I'd like to do is have it appear right after the word family in the definition section.
So this whole section would go in the definition section?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, certainly this language about housing occupancy limits, I don't know that the recitals beforehand would go in.
Well, that's what the whole thing's written as being in 1713, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, I guess I got a follow-up question. Is the state reviewing their position on this? No?
Of course not.
Imagine that.
It's been signed by the governor, so the
Well,
debate
right.
is over.
But every once in a while, they sign a law, and then 10 minutes later, they go, oh, wow, we didn't think about that one.
Well, I think that's where, for Fort Collins, where the Governor Polis did come in and kind of intervene when there was, the debates were really, I mean, their chambers were filled with students that were really upset by the U+2, and the governor actually kind of put his words in to Fort Collins as well. So it definitely does not appear
Right.
that he's having second thoughts about it.
Any other questions, comments? I do have one clarification. The city's definition for family is either of the two bullet points. The
Correct.
first bullet point addresses related individuals, and that sets no limit. Is that the intention, and is that correct?
That is the intention, and that is correct. We do have situations where we have group homes that come together, and Commissioner Smith, while she was mayor, we had a situation come up with kind of a sober living group of people who were living together, cohabitating for sort of mutual support to get off of drugs. And when it was learned that they had, I think, either 7 or 8 people living there, so they were within this definition, there was no further need to have them go through a land use approval process at that point.
Okay, but for clarity, if you were related, you could have 20, 30, unlimited number of persons within a
You
family
could have a
definition.
permanent Thanksgiving, yes.
Which, by the way, that almost could have been my household with our 6 kids. My husband, we were at capacity, we could have been at capacity at 8. And in a couple of cousins, and, yeah.
But I guess the point is, if you're related, there is no capacity.
Right.
That's,
Just your sanity.
Doesn't that issue that Brian brought up, though, go back to the occupancy issue related to basically a business? As far as the occupancy level? Because you're limited, if you got a group home, you're somewhat running I'll call it a business. It may be a charity, it may be a shelter, but you fall under the business aspect of that.
I'm not sure how that pertains to the question of this ordinance, though.
Well, from the standpoint of being a relative, that factor of not being a relative was a consideration for basically, again, getting back to the occupancy rates for business buildings. I'll use this one as an example. We have a limit in this room here. If we were all related, we could have 500 in here.
Well, we're not living in this room, though.
True, but again, it kind of bridges on that, I'll say, business aspect.
Well, it does, but again, we're not setting any regulations about whether a group home of this nature
I
would be
understand.
monetized.
I
So
understand.
I don't know whether there's, in fact, money for rent, or whether, these are people who have, for mutual support, decided to just cohabitate and there isn't rent being charged. I don't know. I don't know that we want to get into that kind of a regulation.
Well, it doesn't involve money. It involves the, I guess for the lack of better words, the fact that it's not a family, it's a gathering. And so by the fire safety code, life safety code, there's limitations on what you can put in a building and maintain that. That goes away in the family level, which is how our ordinance reads. That's why the language of family wipes off any number amount. So that group home that I was just talking about basically bleeds into that. It's not a family. They may want to call themselves a family, but it's more of a business, even though there's no
Well,
money exchange.
It is, but in this case, the term family more or less applies to the fact that we're talking about single-family or multifamily dwelling units.
Right.
As opposed to people who are related by blood or marriage or
Right.
adoption, something like that. So, yes, it's a convenience, but it's put in there to address situations where you may have homes where people are living together for mutual support. maybe they, you know, are elderly and need, you know, some live-in assistance, that sort of thing. And by having this as part of the definition of family, it means we don't have to go tinkering with zoning more broadly.
Right. Thank you.
Given that we have an open public hearing, are there any comments from the audience? Seeing none. Yeah, I now close the public hearing. Any further discussion from commission? Hearing none, I now call for a motion and a second to recommend approval to City Council for the ordinance of the City of Canyon City amending Chapter 17.13 of Title 17 of the Canyon City Municipal Code by the addition of a new section 17.13.075, reaffirming the city's right to regulation housing occupancy limits.
I so move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Denise, will you call roll?
Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Ledoux,
Aye.
Commissioner Willett. Aye. Commissioner Souther,
Aye.
Commissioner Maleko,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could I make a comment on something in relation to this?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I was curious with the Senate Bill 24174, sustainable affordable housing, what that is. And the second question is, what is the city currently doing to help to provide more affordable housing?
So this is a provision coming out of the state that says, again, this is primarily dealing with transit-oriented developments. If you are making one of these, a certain percentage of the dwelling units you're going to build, and that is on some sort of a sliding scale based upon the nature of the development, will have to be going for people who are considered low income in the median area where this is being built. We don't have access to transit here. I mean, Denver, of course, has RTD. Colorado Springs has Springs Transit. I know there's a transit system in Fort Collins. So those are the communities that are primarily affected by these rules. I would imagine we would then want to take a look at these again if we ever got transit service to take people from here to, say, Pueblo or Colorado Springs directly by maybe light rail or heavy rail.
Not related to the transit issue, what is going on in Canyon City as far as trying to provide more supply of affordable housing? Yeah, are there anything that the city's looking at?
So yes, and I don't know that it will involve incentives at this point. That'll be a council decision, obviously. But last night, at the Vision Committee meeting, I believe our Economic Development Director, Rick Harmon, presented a new study on a housing needs assessment specifically for Canyon City. There was a study that was done in 2019 for the UA COG, which included not just Canyon City and Fremont County, but jurisdictions outside of Fremont County as well. And while that certainly pointed to a need, it was not specific to Canyon City. And I think there was a sense that if we were going to attract developers here to build, multifamily or more affordable housing, we kind of needed something in our arsenal to say, see, this is how we can prove we have a need for this kind of housing. We did in fact have a developer who was proposing to build a multifamily project using CHAFA funds to help subsidize the cost to make them affordable. They were not awarded through CHAFA's decision-making process any funding, so that project sort of withered on the vine when they couldn't financially make it work to make it an affordable project. But we are certainly aware of this, and we're trying to encourage developers who have experience in that kind of development to come here and build projects.
Is the city looking at any alternatives besides just the private sector? Because the private sector, it's very difficult to get them to build affordable housing because the profits are not there as much. So
So-
there's other alternatives. Is the city even looking at that?
Beyond getting tax credits through CHAFA, I am unaware of any other efforts that have been looked into at this. Now, there may be some alternatives that are pointed out in this housing needs assessment, and I would very much like to have Rick Harmon come and present some of this information to Planning Commission in the new year.
That'd be good, because I think that's a big, big need, not only here, but all over, for affordable housing.
I don't disagree.
As I say that, I'm not on the know now of what's going on, but I know in the past that it wasn't just that one developer, that we've sat down with lots of more than one developer, several, that trying to get them to come here, and they just could not make the numbers work to be able to charge a rent that our citizens could afford. I know we did some things like reduce parking restrictions and trying to reduce other things, do fire suppression incentives. That's an incentive for downtown area that some have used to create apartments downtown that weren't there before. So there's some things like that that have been done. But if you're going to do a presentation, I would recommend maybe even looking at communities like Frisco. They're doing some really cool things for workforce housing. And part of that includes they're buying apartment units and then they're renting it out to their workforce at affordable prices. They become a landlord in a sense to their workforce. Just something to throw out there.
Because
They're
Chaffee
doing
County's
they're
doing a
several
lot
cool
too.
things. Mhm.
There's, if you have the public sector, then the other two alternatives are the public sector and your nonprofit sectors. And you're a lot more likely to get those two sectors involved with the development of affordable housing. So those two options should not be off the table.
So noted. I will ask Mr. Harmon to come and make a presentation to you folks in the new year.
Please,
Thank you.
please do that.
Any other comments on that notion? Next agenda item is announcements and discussion items. A is the 2025 Planning Commission calendar of meetings.
There was an updated one that I left at your seats. Commissioner Maeko pointed out a typo that I'd made on the one that was in your agenda packet, so you should throw that one out and replace it with this one.
Okay, anything else on that calendar?
No, but you may want to circle your calendars for January 9th. We may be scheduling a special Planning Commission meeting for a public hearing on an active project that's going through review right now. Ideally, it was to have come to you this evening. Unfortunately, they didn't make their resubmittal until today, so that kind of made it difficult to take them to Planning Commission.
Well, I got a quick question. Where are we at on the Abbey thing?
So I understand that the prospective purchaser of the Abbey backed out of the project.
Okay.
So they are now looking for alternative purchasers, and in my conversations with Rob Brown, our Economic Development Manager for the county, he has indicated that they've got interest in several parties, and they're kind of looking at proposals from these other parties and deciding which direction they want to go.
Well, I don't want to say I listened to rumor mill, but someone had mentioned that, and I had no idea they'd backed out, so
I think I was at a report that Rob Brown gave this week as well, and he made it sound like the sellers are starting to be pretty difficult to work with.
Oh, yeah.
So even with these prospective buyers, the things that they're asking for them to produce aren't very reasonable. So that doesn't give me very much hope at this point.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
The next on that is the selection of Planning Commission Chair and Vice Chair for calendar year 2025. Do we, given that we're 6 of 7, do we want to proceed with that vote or wait until the next meeting? Anyone have thoughts on that?
I say we proceed simply because we may never be at full strength, and we'll just keep putting it off. And you're doing a fine job, but I don't know if you want to be acting all the time.
Given that, I now open the floor for nominations for chairman.
She's passing out some voting slips. Thank you.
Well, I would like to nominate Brian Ledoux for chairman.
Denise got it.
And never mind.
One's for the.
I was gonna say, I got two, but I guess there's a reason for that.
There is.
Any further nominations for chairman?
I nominate Bob Willett.
Well, thanks.
All right, we have ballots. Any other further nominations? We have Willett and Ledoux. Okay, so circle your one name of the two
For the chairman, yeah.
for chairman.
Pass them down, fellas. You got a hat to put these in?
Let's draw it out of that, that's right. Thanks for the nomination, Gary.
Hey, you're welcome.
We will take a brief pause while those are
We only
tabulated.
talk about it every year.
I know. Tied up.
Well, the only other
Like
option
that.
is to hand out another slip and we'll vote on the tie.
I believe we can flip a coin. Is
We could do that too.
Yeah.
Somebody have a
I'm all
coin?
for it. So let's
You
flip a
know, I
coin.
don't.
We don't have any coins, but
You gotta be the only one that has
Well,
one.
then
I don't
you,
have one on me. You don't know how to flip a coin?
Bob calls it, you flip it.
tails.
Heads.
Tagger it, Brad.
All right. By coin toss, Commissioner Ledoux will continue to serve as chairman 2025. This says June 30, but it's calendar year.
Actually, I think we were going by June to June.
Yeah.
We just been waiting so long.
Well, the fiscal calendar would be from July 1st to June 30th. So this would carry you through until mid-year, and then we would vote
Gotcha.
again.
Okay, so June 30th, 2025. So, I now open the floor for nominations for vice chairman.
Yeah, I nominate Bob Willett.
Oh,
I'll nominate Aaron.
Any further nominations? We have Aaron Maliko and Bob Willett. If you would circle your ballots for one of those two.
Drum roll.
Ties aren't allowed.
I'm gonna say, if you say tie again, you're in trouble.
be
We get
flipping,
We have a
the-
coin.
We're gonna
so
get the
it's fine.
gavel out.
be flipping again. And Patrick, you said there's potentially a special planning commission meeting on the 9th of January?
January 9th,
January
yes.
9th? Okay.
you will give us plenty of notice, I presume.
He just did.
Yeah,
Reminder.
this is all the notice you're gonna get. So you either show up or you don't.
I will confirm before the Christmas holidays by email whether or not that meeting is going to happen.
You want to announce the finding?
So, Mr. Bob Willett has won. So
Ta-da.
Commissioner Willett will serve as vice chairman
Thank you.
through June 30th, 2025. With that, we are adjourned.